that he's going to make an average of $80,000 a deal.
Size matters.
Hey, it's Cris Chico, and if you're a real estate investor, wholesaler, getting started, or number two, you are already doing the business and you're struggling with doing deals that are only $5,000 or $10,000, and you'd like to maybe get those deals up to 20, 30, or 40 or more $1,000 per deal, then I've got an exciting interview here with you, because I've got a good friend of mine doing amazingly well, taking his average deal size and sending it through the roof. When he told me that, I said, you know what? We've got to get on a call. So I got my good friend here, Todd Toback. Todd, how are you?
I'm doing good, Cris. Excited to be on the show. Awesome to catch up. Let's rock and roll, baby.
Now, I said this to Todd right before we got on. I said, Todd, all these podcast interviews, they do one thing wrong. You got to sloth through 30 minutes of your backstory of how you were poor and how you were an imbecile, and then how now you were able to now not be an idiot because now you found real estate. Let's skip all of that. And let's get down to the nitty gritty details. I'm going to have you take over, and then I'm going to go ahead and ask you questions as we go along.
Awesome. Well, Cris, again, thanks for inviting me on the show here. And I'm just really, really excited because if you're listening to this show, I'm going to radically, and Cris is obviously going to help extract some of this information, but we're going to radically either set you off on the right foot or get you kind of course corrected so that you're going to see your bank account swell up. So Cris, you know, ironically, you and I are like some of the oldest guys, you know, in the industry.
Yes.
Right. I mean,
you still have hair though.
I know.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, it's funny. There's a lot of, you know, preconceived notions on what you should make on a wholesale deal. I know before we hopped on, back in, you know, 2012, 2013, everyone had this mindset that, hey, you know, most wholesalers make $5,000, $10,000, you know, $15,000 on a wholesale deal. And I remember reading a book by Robert Allen, Multiple Streams of Income. And he talked about this concept of an assignment, right? I'm not sure he even called it wholesaling, but he mentioned how he heard of someone flipping a ski house and made $250,000. And I had a good corporate job at the time, but I was like, wow, that's a lot more than I'm making in one single deal. So when I went and did my first deal, long story short, like that was my target. And I'm thinking I got to, you know, do that big deal, and I'm going to go and lock up a deal and flip it for that. So long story short, I locked up my first deal and I made $80,000 on that deal. Now I had to split that with my brother-in-law because I had no idea what I was doing, and I had to actually go get the money to close the deal. And so I made 40, but that was my first deal. But Cris, what was so exciting about that was that, you know, that $40,000 was almost all profit. You know, I probably had about $700 or $800 in marketing at the time, right? And so you can imagine now I have this whole entire nest egg to now fuel my business. Versus if you're out there and you're trying to do a $10,000 deal, and sometimes it's not $800 to get a deal. Sometimes it's $2,500, right? And you have all your other expenses and subscriptions and all this other stuff, and you know it's hardly any money. And so for me, that was like my norm, right? I'm like, okay, I want to do deals like this on the regular. And so I started going to masterminds and, you know, networking with other people, and then I got into the coaching business, and I saw a radical difference in the P&L. Now, if you know what the P&L is, it's the most important number in business. It's the profit. Okay, it is that that black number at the bottom of this. And if you don't really know how to read a financial statement, that's okay. But it basically means your income minus your expenses and what that profit is. And I noticed that the people who were doing bigger deals really had all the profit, and the people who were doing these 5, 10 little stinkers we're just struggling month after month after month. And, you know, hey, congratulations for doing deals. But if you actually took the salary that they were making, you know, my thought, I mean, you know, I'm not trying to offend anybody here, but you might be better off getting a job at that point. Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if
because when people talk about like their real estate business, most people, they just say, oh, I'm doing X number of deals. And so that's what everybody, X number of deals. But nobody ever talks about like, okay, how much are you really making? Like some people say, oh, I have a team of 15 and we're doing a gazillion deals, but nobody ever talks about, okay, how much money that gets deposited into your bank account that you could do whatever you want with at the end of the month. And that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. So last year we only did 65 deals, right? We only did 65 deals. And I've been in this business for a very, very long time. But that being said, we say no to a lot. Right. So one of the things I talk about is if we're like in a cattle call and there's a bunch of other investors out there, I tell my guys, you're out, get out of there. No way, no how. Don't even think about it. They're like, but we make $10,000. I'm like, no way, get out of there. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to, we could talk a little bit about this, but if I had to just emphasize one thing on this podcast, it's that your deal size matters. Size matters. Okay? In wholesaling, size matters.
In other parts, but we're gonna keep this one clean here.
Yes. Okay.
All right. So what's the path that somebody can take, right? That if they're doing either starting off from scratch or maybe they're doing deals right now and they're making $3,000-$5,000 a deal, what's the path for them to be able to start moving toward what you're doing now?
Okay. Well, Cris, I'm going to first talk about mindset, but don't worry. There's some tools, actual tools that we're going to give you. So at the end of this podcast, I actually have the exact script that you can use to do bigger deals. And then there's also a link that I'll send you to actually train you on that script. So I'll get to that. But the most important thing that you've got to start off with is, number one, making a decision. Okay. Something that one of my mentors, Dan Sullivan, calls commitment, right? Commitment where you are committed to the new goal. Now, everybody in any industry, no matter, or entrepreneur, has an income thermostat, Cris, okay? Right. And what that income thermostat says is, I am used to making this per transaction, or I'm used to making this per month. Now, you may be listening to this and be like, no, I don't have that. I want to make as much money as possible. No, that's not true, right? Because there's a reason why you don't work in McDonald's, right? Or you're listening to fast food, is because that's too little, right? You're currently above your thermostat. And there's also a reason why, you want to make 10 million and you're not, right? Is that maybe you're comfortable making $200,000, right? It's not good or bad. It's just, that's what it is. And so we all have this comfort zone. If you actually look at your average deal, it's going to blow you away, is over time, you're going to find that not everybody, but you'll see 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, maybe 12.5, maybe 8.5, but it's going to always go back to that 10,000 if that's your income thermostat, right? It might be 20, it might be 30, it might be 40, right? So right now, it's funny, you mentioned, hey, Todd's got about a dozen deals, about $80,000, right? Well, guess where my wholesaling income thermostat is right now? It's about at $80,000, right? And I'm always trying to push that up with my team. So the first step that Dan Sullivan talks about is this commitment to this new goal, right? And it should be scary and it should be uncomfortable. And you're going to say, hey, I'm going to go do that, right? Now, that's that first part, okay? And again, this is all from Dan Sullivan. The second part is you've got to understand that there's going to be some courage that's going to be involved, right? So all of a sudden, you're going to be negotiating with sellers. And we're going to teach you all of this, but I'm just going to go through the mindset here in a second. But the second part of that is, hey, you're going to be negotiating with a seller and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, what if I lose this deal? What if I go for the 50, 60, and what if I lose this $10,000? What's going to happen then? Oh my gosh. Well, now you're going to have courage to go for the big deal when necessary, right? Sometimes you have to give up the good to get to the great, okay? And the third step, okay, again, from Dan Sullivan, okay, and this is, is very important, is the capability, right? Is that you eventually actually get good at this, right? You get good at buying the right way. And there's a second part of this, which is selling the right way, which is huge, is a huge, huge, huge part of this, right? And that's something that we call competence, okay? Competence, where you actually get the skills to do this. And the fourth step, Cris, is, guess what? It's confidence. It's confidence. Yeah. Now, we all want the order to be different, right? We all want the confidence to come first.
Yeah.
The problem is you can't do it that way, right? Growth is scary, and so you have to go through that second phase, which is the hardest part. It's that courage phase where we're scared of the unknown, scared of doing the deal, scared of what the seller is going to think, scared of losing the deal, scared of upsetting our old buyers. And now you have to get through that. And so I would start there, is number one, the commitment and understanding the whole courage, capability, and then confidence continuum, okay? Because after this, hopefully you're going to commit, and we're going to give you the skills on the podcast. And then number two is you got to have the courage. And if you get through the first steps, the first 3 and 4 just come, okay? So you've got to change that, and you've got to make that decision today. And so if your average deal is $10,000 right now, and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to do 30,000. I once did a coaching program, and it was called Bigger Deals, Chris. And we challenged everyone to double their deal size over a period of 8 weeks. And because the power of the group and the pressure and all this, I said, name the number. I mean, virtually everybody started doubling their deal size. I mean, it was probably one of the most successful coaching groups I've ever run. And it was so exciting to do that. So you might be saying, okay, Todd, well, actually, how do we do this? Right?
Yeah, one thing I was going to make a comment before you get into the how is that one thing that always I hear when you say courage, and obviously we're talking about fear, people, when new investors, and you sense that where they're like, well, I don't want to lose a deal. Well, what if I make the offer too low and then the seller, says no, and then they get so pissed off that then I lose everything. So that's on the seller side. And on the buyer side, I hear it all the time when they're like, oh, but what am I going to do if the buyer sees how much I'm making and they're going to know that I'm making all this money. And so now you start to, once it goes over that 15 threshold and they get into the $20,000, $30,000 deals or more, they start asking those questions. And so when you say that, I'm like, yeah, I know what they're going through, because that's exactly the dialogue that they ask. And you're like, yeah, they're afraid. They're afraid of making that much money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that on the dispo side, because I've got so much to say. That's kind of like a little bit of my specialty, Chris, because a lot of that goes through, who you believe you are and what you deserve. But we'll talk about that. But let's start with the acquisition side. Is that okay, Chris? So the first side is, by the way, and again, I'm going to talk about this whole a little bit about the script that we have right now. But if you want to download that, you can go to nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/script. nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/script, and you'll actually get the script that we use to lock up over 1,300 deals. I mean, this thing, 1,300 deals in my own company, and then thousands and thousands and thousands across the country. So,
yeah, and I'm going to put a link in the description for that as well, so you guys could just click on that. Don't do it right now. I want you to continue listening to this podcast, right? But you can get the link in the description. Go ahead, Todd.
So, and by the way, if you're driving, don't obviously switch off. But the going back to getting those bigger deals, right? One of the things that you want to be doing during the process, Chris, is conditioning the seller the entire time. Okay. So many investors, they try to build so much rapport, and they they're scared to tell the sellers that they're in this to make a profit. And when you're like that, what it does is, number one, that you're not conditioning the seller, you're not prepping the seller. And so when you go and meet the seller, it's like, whoa, this big shock. But number two, it actually erodes trust, because the seller is wondering what your true intentions are, right? If it's all rapport and all friendly, and you're coming over and they don't, you act like you're going to be paying the super high price, they're very skeptical, right? Versus if you're like, hey, I'm an investor, right? I'm here to make a profit. I'm going to make this really, really easy for you. Right? It's super convenient. It's white glove service, but just a heads up, you're going to trade some equity for some speed and convenience. Right? And that's a friendly, like a friendly way to say that. But now, okay, they are conditioned, like they know, right? And so sometimes also during the conversation, we might say, hey, you know what? Like, why not just list the property, right? Fix it up, put some money into it, and you could just sell it for top dollar. Like I'm not that guy. Right? Again, you're going to probably, give up some equity if you're going to be dealing with me. But if you want that top price, going with an agent is probably your best bet. And then shut up.
And allow them to tell you, yes, okay, I understand. And I still want to continue to have that dialogue with you.
Yes. But during that entire process, Chris, and everyone's listening, if you're listening to this, it's these little drops of things that are slowly readjusting their expectations on the price.
Right.
Okay. And so even if they have a price in mind now and they're stuck on it, as you drop these things and they get to know, like, and trust you, and you using these words, you want to say it in a friendly way, right? It's not like, hey, you're going to give up all your equity, and do business with me, right? Right? It's, hey, look, I specialize in making this really easy, right? So I may not be the best option for you. I'll tell you what I think your house is worth, and I'll tell you what I can pay, but I can tell you that I've got to make a profit, knowing that is it. Should we continue the conversation? And by the way, no is fine.
But also, too, at the same time, most sellers will go on Zillow. So if you try and tell them that, oh, your property isn't really worth that much, but they go on Zillow and they look around, they're like, I think it is. Then they see you as a liar versus, yeah, your property could be worth more, but here's my business model, and it may or may not work. Let's have a conversation, dialogue about it, right? So that's the other thing, is that they see you as a liar when you try to tell them that the property isn't worth what they think it's worth, you know, et cetera.
And so the other part about that is I never, ever tell a seller what their property is worth, ever, right? And in terms of, I don't argue with them. If they say it's worth X, I don't say it's Y, right? I just say, hey, this is where I'm comfortable, right? I'm looking at, you know, these 3 deals over here, and this is what I feel like I can pay or want to pay. Right. And so as soon as you're in a position where you're arguing, the other part about this is just posturing, is if I know I'm going to be wholesaling this thing, right? And this is just a power thing, is I never act like I'm going to go in and fix up the property. Right? Like some people say, well, I've got to fix the roof, or I got to do this, or I got to do that. It just, because if you're going to be wholesaling, first of all, you're a liar, right? And it just weakens you, right? It just weakens you. Whereas for me, I'm like, look, you know, and I'm going to talk about this on the disposition side in a second, because all of this is you're setting this all up, right? For you to be in an ultimate power of strength, because you don't have to lie. You don't have to lie. There's a reason why someone is calling you, okay, on the phone. Okay, so now let's get to mechanics. Now, remember, we got the number in mind that we're trying to get, right? And, you know, the part of that is, you know, now that we're targeting that, we're going to start negotiating there, because you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate.
Now, before you get into negotiating, can I come back to when I just come back, when you say posturing? So if you're talking with a seller, and you're saying not to tell them that you're going to be fixing up the property, but at the same time, sellers don't understand wholesaling. So do you tell them that what do you tell them if you're not telling them that you're going to buy the property, fix it up, and potentially resell
Well,
it?
I don't tell them I'm going to fix it up.
Right.
I don't tell them I'm going to fix it up. Right. Believe me, because sometimes we'll wholesale a property, or sometimes we'll take it down. Our takedown is mean that we actually close on it. Right. So we'll talk about 2 of those business models there in a second. Right. By the way, I don't go out of my way. Just because I don't tell the seller something doesn't mean I tell them everything.
Everything.
Right? You know, so I'm not going to say, hey, by the way, I'm going to lock this up today, and I'm going to sell it to another buyer for no risk for $80,000 profit with, you know, in a day. Right. I'm not going to say that, because the seller, it's not relevant. The seller doesn't need to know that. Right.
Right. You're not getting into what you're going to do with the property at the end. You know, when all is said and done, you're not getting into the nitty-gritty details about what you're going to do with the property. You're just presenting yourself as an investor. And as an investor, you have certain parameters in terms of what you can pay for the property.
Correct.
And that's it. So you're just keeping it there, right?
Correct.
Not getting into, because then I assume if you start getting into those details, oh, I need to fix the roof, or I need to fix the kitchen, they might say, well, the kitchen's fine. What do you mean? I've lived here for 30 years and it looks amazing. And then you get into like a lot of stuff that you shouldn't get into.
Correct. Okay. And all of this will catch up to you later. Okay. And I'm going to talk about the dispo side of this. All right. Which is it's probably 65% of this, especially in the current market that we're in. Right. Because this is very, very relevant to today's market, with a hot market, when the buyers, because you must take advantage, you must strike while the iron's hot, because this will not last forever, right?
Yeah.
And when the market does change, Chris, we'll do a new podcast to adjust then, right? But right now, this is where we're at. So now it comes the actual talking, right? And so when you're talking about, and this is in the script that we mentioned earlier, is you want to ask a seller, the one question I love to ask is, hey, you know, if I were to pay all cash and cover all the closing costs, and you could buy the house as is, right? And there are no fees, what would be the best price that you would take? Right? And then you zip it. Now, I think many wholesalers ask that question in some form, right? You know, or that's what's trained.
Yeah.
But this is the key, is that most people, they stop there, because over the years, you know, sellers have gotten a little more sophisticated, and you know, they know, hey, whoever mentions a number loses. So I would say at least 50% of sellers now say, I don't know. You know, you
make me an offer.
Make me an offer. You tell me. Well, if you're not trained, then most wholesalers, they crumble. They go, and then they shout a number that's way too high. You know, then you got a $10,000 wholesale deal on your hands, right?
Right.
Right. So now you got to go deeper. Now this is where some of that capability comes in. This is the skill. So you want to ask at least 5 different ways. Okay. So, okay, well, can you give me your best guess? Just as, you know, your second way, impress, stay here. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to feel the tension. That's okay. right? Can you give me your best guess, right? And then all of a sudden, if they won't go, I say, well, can you give me a ballpark, right? A ballpark. That's just, something third that you can say.
Right.
And the fourth way that I like to say is, and again, I'm not going to hold you to it, but do you have any idea what stuff is selling for in the area? Right. And then have them say a number and say, okay, well, were you looking for that, or were you, willing to trade a little bit of equity for speed and convenience? Right. That's the fourth way. Okay. And so again, there's a little bit of tension here, and that's okay. Tension is good. It means you're moving, right? It means that there's action happening. Now, that's the four ways. Now, this is where most investors crumble, Chris. Now, when they feel like the seller is not giving a number, they feel like the seller is kind of sophisticated, right? And they're like, oh, they're not giving me a number, and it's like, they're really savvy and they're really tight, and so they shoot out a number and they're weak, right? And I'm not insulting you, but again, at one point, this is me, and so they're scared to go in the number. So this is where you got to get that courage. So now, if they won't give you a number after the 4, you now go with a very, very, very low number. You can soft pass a low number, and it should be way lower than you are comfortable with. Way lower, like $100,000 profit at least. Okay.
Well, if you're not embarrassed about your offer, they say it's too. If you're not embarrassed about your offer, then it's too high. Would you say
Correct.
That's accurate?
Right. And then take off another 50. Okay.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So, if you're at $300,000, and let's just say, you know that you can move this at 300, right? I'm going to be like, hey, and it's all in the tone. It's all in the tone. If you say, I'll give you $200,000, you don't want to say it that way.
Yeah.
Right? You want to say, what if, I don't know, what if I could give you somewhere in the range of 200? Is that something that you'd even consider, or probably not?
Got it.
Now, they're going to say one of two things. They might say, well, I might consider it, right? Then if that's the case, get in your car and drive over there like now, okay? Or they may say, no, there's no way I would consider that, right? Well, at that point, I say, okay, well, then obviously you've got some idea of what you want. That sounds ridiculous to you, right? And I get it. Where would we need to be in the ballpark?
Right.
So that's something I teach, where that last one is actually another way just to ask what they want, right? Where you go really, really low, it's going to evoke a reaction. Obviously, they're not going to like that. Or if they do, that's great. But if they don't, then they're going to now counter with another number, maybe closer to you, and then the negotiation can begin.
Got it. Now, the couple questions I had for you. One thing that we do is on the phrasing of that is we say, instead of saying, oh, what about like on that initial offer, sometimes we phrase it like, well, a house of, typically for a property like yours, we're in the past we're typically paying between X and X, and it's a low number, but we're presenting it as, hey, I'm not making an offer, I'm just telling you what we have normally been paying for that. Do you feel that is also a good approach, or you feel that that's weak because you're not directly saying, oh, here's what I'm offering you?
No, as long as that number is low, right, you can kind of test the waters there a little bit, right? And what you're looking for is a response. So if you get I just care if you get the result. So if you use that and you get the response, great. If not, I'll try something else. So everyone says CYA, right? And they think it's cover your rear end, right? But really, it's no, change your approach, right? Change your approach. If you don't get it, I always kind of look at when you're working with a seller, it's like you try to go in one spot, right? And if you're watching this in video and you get stuck, well, okay, move over here, right? And try to get in this spot, okay? And this is not working, okay? Try this. Right.
You're also, in some of the markets you operate, you have a physical, you can go to the houses, but does this apply both in a physical aspect, but also virtual as well?
Yeah.
Number one. And if you're doing it virtually, is this all happening on the first call? Because some people say, oh, you shouldn't make an offer on the first call. You should have some back and forth, call them back. I'm not sure, curious about your process there.
No, I mean, for me, I'm always about not extending the sales process. Right.
Got it.
So if you're in your market, because time kills deals. So if you're in your market and you're locally meeting with people, right, and this is what you do, don't change 3 things at once, right?
Yeah.
You're on the phone call, now I have this and I'm going to get out there. And that was just a starting point for negotiations, right? But if you're locking up deals over the phone, you can do the same exact thing, right? And you can have that conversation. You want to keep the line tight. And if the seller is moving and they're interested in doing business, I'm not going to get off that phone. I'm going to keep that line very, 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 very tight. you know, in this market, I don't find that we lock up many deals over the same phone calls. You know, we locked up one, our acquisition specialist locked it up, and they had a notary go out there. And that's one of my favorite ways to lock up a deal if you're not if you're not going in person, is just using a notary to go out there. So I prefer to keep that line very, 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 very tight. You know, but sometimes
notary versus sending a contract via Docusign or HelloSign or something like that.
Correct.
Yeah. What's the mindset around that?
Well, number one is that, you know, if they get the Docusign, you have all kinds of you know, things going against you. Number one is that they have to know how to use the technology, and don't overestimate, you know, the
technical ability.
Right. You know, number two is that, you know, the way it is, it's just kind of scary, right? You have to like look it and you sign it, and it's hard to read it, you know. And again, some people just sign it and they just look at the number and just go, and that's fine. So, I mean, we've done deals with Docusign. But the thing with a notary, it also tells you a lot, right? Because if you make an appointment, say they're going to be there at 6, right? It's going to flush out some objections, because like, whoa, why don't we slow this down for a second? Versus if you send them a Docusign, they can just look at it and sit on it for a week.
Yeah. This tip right here that he's giving you is one to really listen to and not do anything with it. But if you think about this, it also separates you from the other people that are sending out Docusigns as well. You know, so it's a point of differentiation, because there's human to human contact, like he says. So that's a really good tip. That is a really good tip. So what's next? So we talked about you having that discussion with the seller about price and laying that first offer to them, right? And again, that the offer that you make is not one that you're going to feel comfortable with. And if you feel comfortable with that offer, then it's likely too high. That's where we left off.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where do we go from here?
Right. And so one of the things that you want to do, and again, this could be done over the phone or in person, is now you want to just listen and then price condition them. Okay. So if you're in person, what I like to do is you like to go through the house, and I actually got this one from Sean Terry, is you go through the house and have the seller take you around, and I'll show you how to do this in a second, is you touch everything that's kind of imperfect, right? And you make a face, you know, you know, if there's a floor or a crack in the wall, just look uncomfortable. And the seller all of a sudden is going to start telling you, oh, that's no big deal, or this or that. Don't say a word. Do not respond. Do not object. Do not say anything. Just look through the things, and then ask questions and be like, oh, okay, is the pool operational? You know, oh no, the pool filter's broken. Oh, you know, go over, look at the pool filter, you know, whatever that is, right? A little water stain over here with the water, just touch it, you know, and just do that for a good 15, 20 minutes. It should be very, very painful. Okay. Very, 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 very painful. Now, if you're on the phone, you can do that, but you could have a little checklist and just kind of go through everything in the house and go, you know, okay, does it have a pool? Right. Oh, it doesn't. Oh, when was the roof last replaced? You know, 2013. Oh, and this is after you talk about price, right? You know, when was the roof replaced? 13. Oh, okay. You know, what year was the plumbing, right? So you can do that and start to now price condition here on this. Okay.
Got it. Yeah.
So now, you know, this is the art. So now you're coming to a number, and you're getting there. And now what you want to do is, again, it's not a this versus you. You want to test the waters. So now you're talking about price. The contract's out, or you're there at the end. And now, you know, the seller maybe is at 180. And now you could say, okay, well, what if I could get you, what if I could get you anywhere from like 160 to 170? Is that something that you'd consider? A 160 to 180? Use the range technique. So it's not threatening, right?
Right.
And they may say, okay, you know, and so you use that range technique until you get to that number that you want to be, right? And you should be uncomfortable. Okay. So now we got the number here. Obviously, if you're going to make 40 or 50 and you're there and you're trying to get that extra 30, you don't need to do that, right? You know, once you're getting close to that number, you know, you don't want to be a pig either, right? But you want to get a good size, chunky deal on the front, get the contract signed. Okay. So now that's acquisition side. Okay. And that's our acquisition. We got a contract. Now, this is where most investors drop the ball. This is where all the courage comes in, team. Because right now, most investors, they have one or two cash buyers. And it's very much like a big brother, little brother relationship, employer-employee relationship. I'm the master, you're the servant. I'm the mentor, you're the mentee. And you make this much amount of money when you sell properties to me.
Right.
And the one thing I hear from, some of my licensees and my private one-on-one coaching clients is, well, I really like this guy and we have a great relationship, and, it's just really easy to do business. And, I don't want to like ruffle any feathers and hurt the relationship.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I bet that person loves you, because if you're feeding them deals that they're making $70,000, $80,000 on without touching them,
Right.
right, and you're making 10, of course they love you, right?
Right.
Of course the relationship is good on their end, okay?
Yeah.
Right? And so, I'm going to take you out to lunch, and I'm going to, tell you how awesome you are, and I'm going to buy you great Christmas gifts, because I know that you're bringing me a huge amount of value. So my recommendation here is we have this process. It's really interesting because at one point we had Tony Robbins' sales manager. His sales manager was working inside of our company, right? And he kind of came up with this process where, number one, and I'm really proud that we kind of like pioneered this thing, is we created this basically a bidding method for selling all of our wholesale deals. So I sell properties two ways. Number one, in a bidding method with an in-house cash buyers list. And number two, I stick them on the MLS. But the first part of this is, and we'll get to the third part here, Cris, and we'll wrap up in about 10 minutes or so. But
okay.
The first part of this is setting that expectation with your buyers, right? So what happens is I'll send out a property. There'll be a suggested starting bid. There's a 1 hour window in which you can view the property. There's going to be, you can bring your inspector, right? But after that, you have to give your highest and best bid. It's $5,000 non-refundable EMD. It's a 10-day close, and it's cash or hard money only, right? And you want to set that up with your buyers from day one. You want to indoctrinate them the right way and understand that they're going to be competing with other buyers there. Right?
Got it.
And this is something I actually got in part also from when I was doing lease purchase deals. We used to do this with tenant buyers. And so when you sell the property, you now want to create a feeding frenzy. There should be like a dozen people there at the same time, a ton of activity, right? And it should be, they should know that they need to come in with their highest bid, period. Okay?
Okay.
That if you do that alone, you're going to double your deal size.
Now, in that scenario that you're talking about, let's say if you have multiple buyers coming out to the property, and now, if you close on the property and it's yours, that's easy. But if you have a seller there, and then now you're going to have 3, 4, 5 people coming through, what do you tell the seller?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me tell you this, Cris. Again, we've been in this business a long time.
Yeah.
And especially I've had people be like, oh my gosh, what is the seller going to think? I mean, I've heard this like every single time. It's like, right? So I remember I had one of our acquisition specialists. We actually, went into a new territory and bought an existing business. And there was an existing acquisition specialist there. And so we switched to this. And he's like, oh my God, what am I going to tell the seller? Oh, no, I hate this. I don't like this. Oh my God. And that fear crept in, right? And I'm like, look. I'm going to double your commission here. Relax, right? So this is all about anchoring the seller. Okay. So a few years ago, Cris, I built a pool in my house, and my wife hates contractors. She hates having people over. It just totally stresses her out. Pool guy came over and said, listen, I get jobs done fast. I'm in, I'm out. It's total pandemonium. I'm not going to have any use of your property. There's going to be mud everywhere. There's going to be, though, a ton of people here. You're going to be nowhere to park. It's going to be super inconvenient for 8 weeks. But I will be out of here, and you will have the nicest looking pool ever.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me tell you, this is the best experience my wife has ever had, because it's exactly what he said. There was trucks everywhere. We couldn't park. My wife has to walk a quarter of a mile to get back into her house. And it was awesome, right? And our pool, she saw a lot of activity, meaning she knew that the end was coming, and we got the pool done. So what does that have to do with this? When you sign on the dotted line with a seller, you now anchor them. You give them a very, very clear expectation. So let me tell you, Mr. Seller, you want it easy and convenient? This is easy and convenient. I'm going to do everything at once. Okay, so what I needed from you is an inspection time. 6 days from now, or 7 days from now, right? I need about an hour and a half to look at it, okay? And it's going to be pandemonium. My contractors are going to be here, okay? My inspectors are going to be here, and some of my buyers are going to be here also. I also slip that in at the end, okay? And so you're going to see some activity here because I need everything to go at once, okay?
Wait, what if they ask, what do you mean buyers? I don't get that.
Oh, I start marketing. I told you I do everything past. I start marketing this property even before I sell it, Mr. Seller.
Got it. Okay. So in their mind, they're thinking, oh, he's going to market it to sell it after. But you're not telling them this, but they're probably in their mind thinking, oh, he's going to fix it up, but he's trying to sell it already before he fixes it up. Is that?
I just tell that I'm already having buyers come over to look at it. Right? They don't really even ask me that. They're like, well, what stage they're going to buy it? They don't. They don't.
So that's a good point because I'm bringing up questions that I believe are obstacles when in fact they're not obstacles, which is what most people do, right?
Yeah, they're not like, when are you going to buy it, right? I'm going to be like, no. Like, I'm going to start marketing this so I can sell this as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I can pay you. That's why I can pay you what I can pay you.
Now, the other thing I thought about is some people ask, well, if I have my buyers going to the property, how do I know that a buyer isn't going to go behind my back? Yeah. The thing I was thinking about, and I want you to answer this, but the thing I was thinking about it is that if there's more than one buyer, there's less of a chance of that happening because then if a buyer is just individually with a seller one-on-one, they're more likely to start having that conversation versus if there's more people around, they're likely not going to have that conversation. But curious to know what your thought is.
Yeah, well, let me give you a little hack here. Number one, I do like to have usually someone at the door taking names, right? And to do that. But here's a little like ninja trick. This is something I've learned. For every deal, you want to hire a professional home inspection. Get a professional home inspector. With this is like one of those things where it's like a promise that you're going to keep to the seller, okay? So when you tell the seller that you're going to send an inspector and you actually send that person there, okay? This is a pro. So they go there, they got the truck, so-and-so inspections. You want to send that person there about 30 to 45 minutes early. So the entire time, the seller is following around this inspector, right? Like totally preoccupied with what this person's going to find, right? But it also gives you all kind of credibility. So I love having that person there because it also, it kind of cements the deal even more and you kept your promise. And so this is this. The funny thing is that like 99% of the stuff that you're going to worry about, like doesn't happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, part of this
that's
also
pretty ninja. I have to say, guys, that is a very, that's a good tip that most people are not going to think through because most wholesalers can be like, oh, I don't want to spend the money. I don't want to, go through that process. Yeah. But it does create, it makes you more legitimate because you are doing what you told the seller that you were going to do. Mm-hmm. Plus, it's a legitimate person with a truck, with a sign and the license and all this other stuff. So now everything looks and appears to be exactly what you told the seller. So that's a great tip. Okay,
but now here's the ninja stuff. Here is the ninja stuff. Okay, so now your buyers bid. You're going to be amazed. So here's what's going to happen, everybody. Your old buyers, the buddy ones that sold for $10,000, they're going to be so pissed off at you. They're going to go and they say, that's it. I'm not doing this. I'm marketing directly to sellers. Forget you, right? Mm-hmm. Guys, that's going to happen. Okay, I'm sorry, but it will. But eventually, you just got to be respectful, be the bigger man or woman, right? And eventually, they may come back, and that's okay. Just say, I'm sorry, but this is my new process. I really appreciate doing business with you, but this is what I have to do for the business to keep it healthy.
Yeah.
Right? And they'll come back, but just don't get offended. Just go, and that's just part of it. But you need to expand your buyers list. Now, if all goes well, you should be able to sell your property now for that, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $80,000 profit because you got more on the front end and you got more on the back end, right? You took the $10,000 here, you got an extra $15,000 here, and you got a $20,000 here. That's $35,000 plus your original 10. That's $45,000. Come on, baby, right? Yeah. All these little tiny little courage moves. So now what you have though is, let's just say you did 4 deals. And this is where small things really make a big difference, Chris. Let's say you were wrong on your numbers for whatever reason. Or now you're making too little on a deal where all of a sudden you thought you were making 40 and now you're making 10. For me, we have standards, right? And so we're not going to do anything less than $25,000. So we send the inspections to the sellers always, right? And I find that if I send us an inspection to a seller and we let them sit on it overnight, right, we could double the amount of times that we're able to get a reduction. Now, if we're over our reduction threshold, right, I'm sorry, our profit amount, we don't renegotiate. We don't like to do that. But if we fall below our profit, our minimum profit, then I say we're okay to renegotiate, to do that.
Got it.
Right? In addition, if the seller kind of asks for some concessions like, hey, can we stay in the property a little bit longer, or this, we say, hey, and they bring this up, well, then we'll also use the inspection, give them a concession, right?
Got it.
And then also ask for another reduction in price. But if you're worried about the money that you're going to spend on inspections, this is the best money that you'll ever spend. Because if you do 10 houses at $250 a piece, that's $2,500. And if I can get a reduction on 2 of those that I normally wouldn't have gotten, right? Well, the return on that might be $30,000 on $2,500. I don't know about you, but it's really, really, really hard to do that with direct mail.
Yeah, it is. That's a great tip, and that's a great way of looking at it, because one way that you guys could look at it is as an expense. Well, I don't want to go through that expense, but it's an investment that you're going to place a bet on, and not all of them are going to pan out, but you just need one to pan out, and it more than pays for the expense plus and then some.
Yeah, I mean, you need 1 out of 50 to pan out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that the just to clarify, if you think about it, if you did 4 deals and you're used to making deals at 7,500 or 10,000, let's say 10 grand, that's 40. But if you all of a sudden now we're doing, like, say, just to round it off, $30,000 deals. Now you have $120,000 sitting in your bank account. That gives you a lot more room to be able to spend more money on marketing, maybe hire a VA, maybe then start to grow your business versus the smaller amounts. And, for me, I think about my own, when I first started in real estate, the big difference for me came when, I went from making nothing to 6 months later, I made like $110,000 in a single month. And that was a lot of breathing room for me not to panic, for me to know, okay, I got some breathing room, this thing works, and then continue to push it. But that is key. And again, all these things, even though Todd does go physically to houses, he has people that do go physically to houses on some occasions, not all of them. All these things could be applied to the virtual aspect of it, 100%.
And Chris, I've done deals all throughout the state of California, right? Which is like basically the entire size of the East Coast. I mean, so, and that's all virtually. So I've done both in person. This doesn't matter where you're at,
Got it.
And I'll be very clear. I want to give 2 more tips here, Chris,
Let's do
on
it.
increasing your deal. And this is where you could pick up some monsters. I find a couple scenarios that if you learn how to do this, it's going to greatly affect your profit. And that's number 1, taking down deals or improving a property. So you can do both. So number 1 is that I think that as soon as you can, you should learn how to start buying properties yourself, or at least have that ability, right? Yeah. So we could do a whole other podcast on raising private money or having the seller finance, but there's just so much money out there available. You want to go and find it. You want to have that available, and you can we still wholesale like 70% of what we do, but that other 30 you want to take down. And there's 2 scenarios which I find greatly enhance your ability to sell a property for more. Number 1 is that if there's some kind of long-term tenant in the property or a tenant in the property and you try to sell that, you're going to kill that resale value by 30, 40, 50, sometimes even $60,000, depending on the volatility of that tenant. So, and I'm talking net profit. So for us, if we could buy a property and just get the tenant out, right? We can add an additional $35,000 to our bottom line like that, right? And I'm
because
talking
because now it's open to a buyer who's going to live in the property, and now it opens up a whole new market.
Well, I'm even talking about a cash buyer who's going to actually fix it up. If obviously you're looking at a retail buyer, now you're looking at way more, right?
Got it. Okay.
Way more. I mean, so you could be, if the house is in decent condition, you're looking at $70,000 or $80,000 more. So yes, Chris, absolutely what you said.
Okay.
Right. So if you just that's the one scenario where I see that you can improve that. The other part I see is if it's filled with trash. Right. So it's filled with trash and it's just like disgusting and it smells, right? And if you can buy that and then just get everything out, right? And do that.
Got it.
Now, let me say this. As you go, you're going to have this money, right? And you're going to build up, and you can do that, or you could use some hard money or private money or use your uncle's money or IRA or whatever that is. And maybe we could do another podcast on that, Chris, sometime. But the other thing that you can do is I have found on some deals that actually I can make some of these improvements before I close with a seller.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. So this goes back to the courage. So I'll tell the seller, hey, you know what? Can I clean out the property so I can start marketing this thing? Right. And we'll have a 60-day close. I'll go in there. We'll get a hauling company out there. They'll clean out the entire thing, get it spotless. Right. We'll stick it on the market. We'll get an extra $25,000 for the sucker.
Got it. Now, how do you protect yourself in the event that the seller decides, oh, I don't want to do the deal anymore?
Okay. Well, let's pretend like you do 4 of these. Right. And only one backs out.
Got it.
Right. I mean, all I'm out is what, $1,500 for trashing. And I know that sounds like a lot, but you're spending that much on marketing. But then on the other 3, I made an extra 20. I made $60,000 and I just lost $1,500 on this one trash out.
Got it. So it's the same principle as the inspection report.
Same principle as the inspection. By the way, this has never happened to me on this type of deal.
Got it.
Right. That's never happened to me. Right. Could I file a memorandum of interest and affidavit? I could. But it's actually, when I've done this with a seller, it's never happened to me.
Well, you can almost say that it also further commits the seller to you, because if another investor were to come in and try and give him a better price, like they already are committed to you because of the work you've done on the property.
Correct.
Yeah.
And remember, that's only $1,500, right? You know, to do that. If there's a tenant situation, I'll say, hey, look, will you give me a power of attorney to deal with the tenant? Right. I'll get him out a month. Right. Start marketing it, close it, and then do the deal. Right.
Got it.
Very similar with probate deals too, is on pre-probate deals, we'll go and we'll handle the probate, put all the money out up front, right? Or get the attorney to do that, right? But you do these little things, right? And all of a sudden, you know, your profit's going through the roof, right? And so these little hacks, and so this is, you know, all stuff.
So you're not rehabbing, just to make clear, Todd, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Todd's not going in there and doing a complete rehab, putting granite countertops and replacing he is just getting the gunk out and then giving him the ability to present the property in a nice, clean state where now somebody is willing to pay more money. So if he does, he could do it beforehand. If he takes it down, my assumption is now that gives you the opportunity to put it on the MLS as well, which will give you even greater distribution. Do you put those on the MLS, the ones that you close?
I put Chris, I put the ones that I don't close on the MLS also, just FYI, you know.
Interesting.
That's another thing. I put everything on the MLS and also send out to my cash buyers list. There are sometimes it's in my contract. Sometimes I would say maybe 2 out of 10, 1 out of 10. They say, I don't want it on the MLS. They spot that. We say, okay, no. And then we just send our cash buyers out there.
Got it. Okay. Guys, the nuggets that he's talking about here, as he's talking, I'm actually writing notes. So I'm a little selfish, Todd. I told you that I was having you come to present to my audience. I actually wanted the tips for myself, and just everybody else is getting access to them here.
Well, Chris, I got to tell you, just if you're listening to Chris, you're on this channel. This guy knows what he's talking about. It's funny. Some of my postcards are derived from Chris. The way that I found my cash buyers is all from his pink postcard that he's done, which always, Chris, you've always let me use. So I just want to say thank you so much. You know, I've learned a lot from you. So thank you very much for having me on the channel.
Guys, I want you to do me a favor. 2 things. Number 1 is, if you got value out of this this recording here and my conversation here with Todd, I want you to make a comment and let me know that, because I want him to come back and say, wow, that they really appreciate it. You know why? Because in that way I can ask him to come again. Yeah. If you guys don't show any love, then he's gonna be like, screw Chico and his people. They don't really like what I have to say. Click the link in the description. He has a great script, and he's someone that I look up to when it comes to advice on building a profitable, this is a key thing, guys, a profitable wholesaling business. So I want to say thank you, Todd, for sharing this. These are some of these things that you just mentioned, like the inspection and also the notary. Those are things that we're going to go ahead and I'm going to have Gina, my team, listen to this recording, and we're going to be implementing some of those things. And I'd love to have you back, but you guys got to show some love to Todd. Otherwise, he ain't coming back.
Let's go. See some comments. Smash the like button. Let's go.
Yes, exactly.